I am a detransitioner, which means I used to think I was transgender, but as it turns out, I'm really not. And, it just wasn't the right thing for me. And I want to share some of my thoughts today. I've been thinking about a lot of things, and I think it's going to be really useful to know if you're getting into transitioning and whatnot. Uh, and it's just another perspective on things. I think it might be valuable to some people. I hope it is. But let me start with why I transitioned in the first place. I think a lot of detransitioners, they have this whole thing where they're like, oh, the trans community pushed me into it. And like, I wouldn't say that's the case for me necessarily. I had a lot of trans friends, but none of them were like trying to push me or anything. But when I started in high school, I met this one trans kid, and I guess just kind of knowing him, like it made me look more into it, and I was like, oh, I think I might have some kind of gender dysphoria, and it just kind of clicked in my head, just randomly, from one day to the next. Um, Now, then I started my transition. I wore clothes and I did all these things, took on a new name and whatever else. And when you're transgender, there are, hormone replacement therapy. It's a big thing. Now, I realized I was trans at 16, but the government is very strict about giving it out. They just give it out to kids, obviously, and that's a good thing. So it would take 4 years for me before I got hormone replacement therapy, which was at age 20. Now, then after having been on that for about, I want to say, 8 months maybe, I just kind of, I detransitioned, right? Um, and so luckily it never had any like super big effects on me. Everything it really did to my body it was in such early stages that it's not, maybe not reversible completely, but it's almost reversible just by waiting it all out. So I'm pretty thankful for that. And now, um, the reason why I detransition, I mean, I don't know for sure, but I have some idea of why it might be. Now, when I was 20 years old, um, I met this girl, trans girl, that I had a relationship with. I'm not gonna go into details, but basically it was kind of an ugly thing. A lot of like disorder, a lot of constant just chaos. It was really like rough on my mental health. Um, and it gave me some level of trauma. Uh, you know, that's what happens. I ignored the red flags. That's on me, right? Even before this, sometimes I would be like, oh, if I just detransition, I mean, life would be a lot easier. I didn't want to, but I was like, well, because when you're trans, the thing is, if you want a relationship, basically, if you want to be with like someone who's into guys, you're too feminine for that, and you're too masculine for people who are into girls, right? So basically, your only options are dating other trans people or dating bisexual people. Um, anyway, but she gave me some level of trauma, and after that, it just started kind of creeping up on me. I was like, I started getting this feeling sometimes that it just kind of felt wrong. I was like, this isn't really the right thing for me. And sometimes it was just for like a short amount of time, and then it would go away. But it started happening more and more for longer periods of time, and eventually, I saw, like, I had been to like an event with my friend, and he'd taken a picture of me and he showed me, and I was like, God, it feels so wrong to have this long hair. Like, it just doesn't feel like me whatsoever. And so on that day, I realized, like, okay, it's time. So I cut my hair short. I did all these things. Now it's almost like when you're coming out to people, right? I live in a pretty, um, in a pretty liberal place. I don't know if liberal is the word, a pretty left-leaning place. And so coming out to my family as trans, that was like, okay, whatever, cool. But it's almost more scary to come out as like not being trans anymore, because I'm like, oh, are people gonna be like, really, after all this like effort I spent on but people generally have just been like, okay, that's cool. Some of them were getting kind of tired of my whole thing, and we're like, okay, finally, I can just I can just treat you normally. And speaking of treating normally, like, it feels really good to just be a normal person now. When you're transgender, like, you're gonna have this like very long period of time where you look odd. You kind of you don't look like a woman. You look like a man trying to be a woman, and that just looks weird, right? So people are gonna stare at you, and it's like pretty uncomfortable. Now I just look like a normal guy. Feels great. I love it. And then also, it just feels more safe. I have a lot of anxiety, personally. I always were kind of anxious, but this whole trauma thing, like it only made it way worse. But like being just a normal guy, it just feels safer. And I guess maybe it's because I'm stronger, like with testosterone and stuff. I think that's part of it, and part of it is also just that people, like, I'm a bit more intimidating, I guess, as a guy. Like, people are like, oh, probably shouldn't mess with some guy, and also they don't really have a reason to mess with me as much as they had before. And I think maybe a lot of there's this like narrative going on about like, oh, all these like trans guys that just transitioning because they're traumatized or whatever. And I used to just kind of dismiss that, but I think it might have. I mean, I'm not saying this is true for all of them. Like, this is maybe a small percentage of them, but I think maybe for a small percentage of them, it could be plausible because it made me feel a lot safer. And part of that is also just not looking trans, right, for me. But I think a big part of it is also just looking like a man. Not that I never really had the authentic woman experience, right? So I can't really comment too much on how it feels to be like a normal woman, but what can you do? This is just my perspective from what I've seen, from what I know. And then I think also, speaking of that, there's this whole, like, within the trans community itself, there's this whole idea going around that it's a very small percentage of people that detransition, and out of those, it's an even smaller percentage of people that detransition because they realize they're not actually trans. A fraction of a percent. And I just don't buy that. That just doesn't feel true to me. I would say it's closer to maybe 5%. Just from my personal experience. Like, I have a close friend as well who did, and 5%, yeah, that's low, right? But that's a 1 in 20 chance. You have to kind of factor that in if you're going to transition. Like, it's big enough that you need to kind of think about the possibility of it, and not rush to things too quickly. I changed all these legal things, and honestly, the legal things are what is giving me hell. I mean, it's not, obviously compared to like poverty or something. It's a very it's a very tiny problem to have, but that's the thing that's honestly being the most annoying. Because when you change the legal stuff, you have to kind of change it everywhere. It's kind of a mess. But yeah, those are my thoughts, I guess. I would say be a little bit careful about what you do. Maybe it's just a defense mechanism for me. Maybe, I mean, who knows, right? It's hard for me to say, but it's been like this long enough that I'm pretty sure about it, that I did the right thing by detransitioning. And it just also, I mean, it just feels right, right? It feels in the same way that it felt bad in the beginning when I transitioned to be called him. Now it feels really weird and for me to be called her, right? I guess, yeah. I hope this is gonna help some people. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. That's okay. Have a nice day.